What's on, people? Shay here, only going to bounce up you guys as well. So I want to talk about Kyle Jamieson today, potentially the missing piece in the New Zealand puzzle. We'll see. Obviously, they made the final of the World Test Championship in June. They're going to be playing against either India, Australia or England. We don't know yet. We'll find out in due course. But I want to talk about Kyle Jamieson, obviously, and his performances over the last year or so for New Zealand. Obviously, played 6 Test matches in New Zealand against India, West Indies and Pakistan. Has been superb. He's taken 36 wickets at 13.78 and he scored 226 runs at 56.5. So obviously he's taking his Test cricket like a duck to water. Extremely, it seems very simple the way he's playing the game. He's been fantastic for New Zealand. But I want to talk about him obviously a little bit in terms of New Zealand's chances and the kind of developments aside. So obviously he's done very well. I mean, listen, any guy who can bowl over 85 miles an hour, with serious bounce coming from 6'8" tall is going to be a handful, obviously, especially on New Zealand tracks. Now, obviously, we won't know really about Kyle Jamieson properly until he's played some away series. Obviously, now he's playing against England in June, 2 Test match series. And I'm not sure what they've got scheduled for the end of the year. I think apparently South African tour is on the horizon. But the reality is, I think until New Zealand are tested on the subcontinent in really more than 2 Test matches, then we'll really get to see what Kyle Jamieson's about. Obviously, I think he'll do quite well, to be honest, in South Africa and Australia, especially certain wickets there. But I imagine him at Joburg could be a real handful. Do you know what I mean? But it's a bit too early to tell me, obviously, in terms of how he's going to go in Test cricket. Obviously, a lot of people are saying that the second coming, but the reality, we don't know. 6 Test matches against West Indies, Pakistan at home in particular, and against an out-of-sorts India side. To be fair, New Zealand played really well, but they spanked that India side. I think they 2-0 last year. I'm still reserving a little bit of judgment. Obviously, he's done very well at the beginning. Said his dimensions are going to be a threat for anyone. He doesn't bowl typical back of a length bowler as that kind of guy who can bowl over 145 clicks and that kind of height. He does generally try to bowl a fairly fullish length. He seems quite intelligent cricketer from what I can see when he's bowling. He can also bat quite a bit as well. I mean, his strike rate is just over 70. So he batted at 9 in his first 2 Test matches against India last year, and now he's moved up a spot. Obviously, he's shown New Zealand that he's shown the management that he can. He's quite capable of the bat. Obviously, so he's batting 8 in their summer. The 4 Test match just happened. I mean, what does it mean for New Zealand bowling going forward? He obviously offers something very different to what they have at the moment. Obviously, Tim Southee is much more of obviously he's very kind of dimensions are similar. He's a bit shorter. I think he's 6'5". Still very tall though, but he's much slower in pace. He looks obviously to swing the ball through the air, general outswinger kind of action. As we know, Tim Southee inside out now, and he's been doing very well over the past couple of years. And I'll get into stats in a little while about New Zealand in general, but Trent Boult, obviously left arm kind of version of Tim Southee, isn't it? A little bit quicker, but gets the ball to move both ways. But general kind of in-swinger action, left arm, over the wicket. I mean, they're both kind of kiss the pitch, fullish length swing bowlers in Southee and Boult. That's what they both possess, and they're both very very skilled operators. Neil Wagner obviously quite different, much more aggressive bowler. Some very different dimensions. He's much shorter especially than Southee, and a little bit shorter than Boult as well, but much more aggressive, kind of a back of a length kind of body line, as we showed us last year against Stephen Smith in Australia. With much more aggressive kind of back of length bowler, feisty character, but he's a very very good bowler, and his stats have proved that over the past couple of years. So I just wanted to go into this because how will Kyle Jamieson kind of shape up in the side? I mean, could he become a fully fledged all-rounder? I don't think he needs to be honest. I think if he can, average somewhere in the kind of mid to late 20s with the ball, and average somewhere around 30 with the bat, I think you've got a very handy cricketer on the hands here, New Zealand. I don't think he'll be a kind of a Ben Stokes. I think he probably fits the mould of what you're seeing in other countries, for example, a Ravi Ashwin or a Chris Woakes, even guys who are very much bowlers, but they are very capable with the bat, as we've seen with Ashwin and Woakes over the past couple of years, especially Woakes last year. I would say more, bowler who bats is supposed to have fully fledged all rounder. That's what a guys can bat 7/8, kind of 7.5 if you want to call it that. I think that's where I see Carl James kind of fitting in eventually. I mean, in general, if you look at, how he's batting, he says he's quite aggressive. I'm not sure I could see him batting at necessarily 6, especially with being, I can see him taking the new ball eventually. I think as a consistent basis, I can see that. I mean, the reality is Tim Southey's been around for a long time now. He's still only 32 years old, but there's a lot of mileage on his legs. But he's going to be 33 end of the year. Bolt is 31, going to be 32, I think, in July. Wagner's going to be 35 this year, so he obviously he's getting on a little bit. So Matt Henry, is 30 years old. They're all kind of north of 30. Matt Henry he's always been kind of the fill-in kind of deputy bowler when there's been injury, for example, like the second test against Pakistan when Wagner was injured. But I don't really rate him that highly. Matt Henry, he's decent, but I think Carl Jamieson is definitely a notch above Henry, and I think everyone can argue now that Jamieson needs to play every. It's very hard, isn't it? We'd say we play every test match as a third teamer, but if we look at the stats, actually, I'm gonna go from the end of the second test and going back to the start of August, which is when the Test Championship that this period has occurred, this 18-month period. The start of the balls actually in Southey's taking 57 wickets, 57 wickets at 21.78. Trent Boult's taking 35 wickets at 31.4. And Wagner's taken 45 wickets at 21.73. I mean, Wagner and Southey have been superb, averaging both 21. And Bolt's not as great, 35 wickets at 31. But those three. Can you see James taking Bolt's place? I don't think so. But I do see him forcing his way into that trio. Maybe taking Wagner's place because Wagner's going to be 35. And if anything, I think James is more like Wagner, like more aggressive, slightly quicker, back of the length. You obviously get some decent bounce on the right wickets. So I kind of see Jamieson might be taking Wagner's spot, even though Wagner's done very well in the last 18 months. But generally the team in New Zealand, they strike me as New Zealand actually of like the Arsenal of cricket. Everyone's second favourite team. Everyone loves New Zealand, I think, because they're quite unthreatening, unassuming, and they play good cricket, and they've got some very talented cricketers there, obviously. In Kay Williamson leads in the front, obviously. Fantastic player. But I think if New Zealand starts to dominate world cricket, people start to hate them as well. I just think that will happen. But for now, New Zealand are kind of everyone's favourite second team, and I think people are cheering for them in this World Test Championship. Obviously, I won't be if they play against England, but if they play against India or Australia, I'll be cheering New Zealand on because they're a small nation, and what they've done is fantastic over the past 18 months and beyond, to be honest. But yeah, I think in terms of just generally all-rounders, well, somewhere close to around that New Zealand have kind of had over the years. And I think about someone like, Jacob Oram, Danny Vettori, Chris Cairns. Chris Cairns, I think, was probably the most fully fledged all-rounder. He came inside as an all-rounder. So did Jacob Oram, but Jacob Oram was very much a batting all-rounder. He could bowl a little bit, but he's very much a military medium pace, not that threatening, very much a fourth seamer, but a good batsman. Had some good stints with the bat in white ball and red ball cricket for New Zealand. Chris Cairns very much a fully fledged all-rounder. Danny Vettori was obviously a spin bowler who became much more of a strong batsman in the lineup as years progressed, especially towards the end of his career. I remember they were playing in the UAE, I think it was, but Vettori batted at 4, because he didn't really trust anyone else around him. This is obviously like 10 years ago now, I think it was. But Vettori was, as his career progressed, he became much more of a capable batsman, kind of similar to Sean Pollock. And this is what kind of those kind of players I see Carl James kind of fitting into. Sean Pollock, a Danny Vettori. I don't see him as like a Ben Stokes, for example. I see him as very much a bowler who will contribute with the bat on a consistent basis. That's what I think will happen with Carl Jamieson. But look at the batting over the past 18 months in New Zealand. I see Henry Nicholls has done well. He's averaging just over 40. Tom Latham, who's been probably one of the best openers in world cricket over the past couple of years, averaging 40.55. Ross Taylor's not been so great. 38.35. Had a pretty horrid time in Australia last year, didn't he? Kane Williamson's been incredible, average 61, and BJ Watling averaging 42.31. So, it's the nucleus of the side is there now, obviously, and there's a kind of a key 8 players there. That's why they've done so well for the past 18 months. The side is pretty much built now. It's the nucleus is strong. You've started from Latham into Williamson, and then obviously you've got support from Nicholls and Taylor, then into BJ Watling, and then into your bowlers. What they lack obviously is a quality spinner, and that they're going to suffer on turning tracks, I think. The likes of Patel, and they've had a Todd Astell, and obviously Mitchell Santner now. They tried as well. They're okay, but I think New Zealand as a whole are gonna they're gonna struggle. I think, to be honest with you, away from home. I think it's important not to get too carried away with New Zealand. I know they've made obviously the final of the Test Championship, and they can absolutely win it at Lords. There's no doubt about it, because that track in June, or was it July? I think it's in June, isn't it? The final, and they can definitely compete. But I still question their ability to compete, away from home, especially in the subcontinent. I mean, we saw last year they got smashed by Australia just over a year ago. So they've still got some way to go. They're not the fish house by any means. That being said, I think Kyle Jamieson is one very large step in the right direction. So yeah, I think it's bode well for the future. He's just turning 26 years old, got plenty of time behind him. Like I said, the bowlers are on the wrong side of 30, to be fair. That's been Varga's case, 35, so I think it's important New Zealand that they produce cricketers like this who can come in and kind of just soar from the off, really, isn't it? So yeah, that's my thoughts on kind of Kyle Jamieson, New Zealand. Let me know your thoughts, guys. What your thoughts, Kyle Jamieson? Do you think he can become a fully fledged all-rounder in the Ben Stokes mould, or do you feel that maybe he will kind of fit into that kind of bowler who can bat a bit, kind of bat 7.5, 8, if you know what I mean? And where do you see New Zealand cricket going from here? Obviously Darren Mitchell coming to side, he's got 100 in that Pakistan Test series, has done well. The batsman, so Ross Taylor's going to be 37 this year, so obviously he's on his way out. But the likes of Nicholls and Latham are still fairly young. They've done well for the past couple of years. So yeah, Kane Williamson's still only 30 years old, so he's got plenty of years left to go as well. So yeah, I think it bodes well for New Zealand cricket. I think if you get that spinner, they can get that one spinner can perform well in the subcontinent. They could be very formidable sides on all services for the next 2 or 3 years. So we'll see. Anyway, drop your thoughts below, guys. If you like the content, please do subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. And hopefully I will see you on the next one. Cheers.